"Don't go, Mama, please don't leave us. I'll be good, I promise, don't go," Bovie wailed, his tiny hands clinging desperately to his mother's dress. His voice cracked with anguish as tears streamed down his face. But Doofy didn't even glance back. Adjusting her suitcase with one hand and her handbag with the other, she walked briskly toward the gate, her face void of emotion. Weeks before this devastating moment, Doofy had been relentless in her demands for money. She wanted to expand her second-hand clothing business, insisting that this venture would finally bring the success she had always dreamed of. Basse, her husband, had tried reasoning with her. "Doofy, I've just finished paying off the house and there's no extra money right now. Can't it wait?" But Doofy wouldn't wait. Each night, she woke him with her tearful pleas, accusing him of being unsupportive and stingy. Her constant nagging and dramatic displays of sorrow pushed Basse into a corner. Determined to keep the peace, he decided to find a way to get the money she demanded. Basse took a risk. He withdrew funds from the bank without authorization, intending to return it before the annual audit. But his plans fell apart when the auditors arrived earlier than expected. The embezzlement was discovered and Basse was dismissed on the spot. Humiliated and devastated, Basse returned home, weighed down by the collapse of his career. When he opened the front door, the sight before him felt like a stab to the heart. The house was stripped bare. Even the couch and the bed were gone. His son Bovie sat on the floor crying uncontrollably. On the dining table lay a note in Doofy's neat handwriting. "I can't stay with a man as useless as you. I deserve someone who treats me like a queen, not someone who gives me excuses. I've found my king and I'm leaving for the States. Thanks for the money. I used it to process my travel documents. I've also sold some of our things as compensation for the years I wasted with you. Goodbye." The words blurred as Basse read them. His knees buckled and the room spun. He hit the ground hard, clutching the note, his breaths shallow and uneven. Bovie crawled over to him, shaking his father. "Papa, please don't leave me too," the boy sobbed. Through his tears, Basse hugged his son tightly. "I'm here, Bovie. I'll always be here," he whispered, his voice trembling. But even as he spoke, a part of him felt broken beyond repair. The faint smell of dust from the empty room and the sight of Bovie's tear-streaked face seared into his memory. As he sat on the cold floor, Basse vowed silently to rebuild, not for himself, but for the boy who had lost everything. Left jobless and humiliated, Basse had no choice but to embrace a life he had never imagined. The proud bank manager was now a common fisherman, rising before dawn and returning home with salt-water-soaked clothes and a body weary from the sun's relentless glare. The sea, once a symbol of serenity, became his battleground for survival. Every coin he earned was stretched thin to care for Bovie, who had to quickly grow up. After school, the boy took to hawking sachet water on the dusty streets, a small smile masking his struggles. "Daddy, we'll be fine," he would say, offering reassurance to a father drowning in guilt and debt. But the hardships piled up. Bovie was sent home countless times for unpaid school fees. Yet father and son clung to each other, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Foss's determination bore fruit over the years. He scraped together enough savings to open a small cold store selling fish and frozen goods. The modest venture gave them a lifeline. Inspired by his father's sacrifices, Bovie poured his energy into his studies. On the day of Bovie's graduation, Basse couldn't contain his emotions. As his son walked across the stage to accept a first-class degree in marketing, tears streamed down the proud father's face. "You've made me the happiest man alive," he said, embracing Bovie tightly. With his newfound skills, Bovie transformed their humble cold store into a thriving business empire with branches across the city. For the first time in decades, their lives brimmed with stability and joy. Evenings were spent playing games and sharing stories, laughter filling their once empty house. One sunny afternoon, the gate creaked open. Standing at the entrance was a figure they never expected to see again, Doofy. She was older, her beauty tinged with a weariness that hadn't been there before. Her eyes glistened with tears as she dropped to her knees. "Basse, Bovie, I'm so sorry. I've come to make things right," she said, her voice trembling. Basse froze, his face hardening with suppressed anger, but Bovie's heart softened at her sight. "Let's hear her out, Dad," he whispered. Reluctantly, Basse nodded, his jaw clenched. Doofy's sobs echoed through the yard. Bovie knelt beside her, his face soft with concern. "Mama, please stop crying," he said gently. "Come inside and tell us what happened." Basse stood a few steps away, arms crossed, his face a stone mask of cold anger. "You think you can waltz back into our lives after what you did?" he spat, his voice dripping with resentment. Doofy looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she began, her words faltering under the weight of her guilt. "But I wasn't myself, Basse. A pastor told me I was under a spell all these years. He prayed for me, and the scales fell from my eyes. Please, let me make it up to both of you." Basse's laugh was bitter. "A spell?" he repeated, incredulous. "That's your excuse for abandoning your family and stealing everything we had? A spell?" He shook his head, his anger barely contained. "You didn't just leave us, Doofy. You left us to starve while you chased your selfish dreams." He turned to leave, but Bovie reached out, grasping his father's arm. "Dad, please," he implored, his voice steady yet pleading. "Just give her a chance." Basse froze, his jaw tightening. The memories of betrayal warred with his son's plea for compassion. His shoulders sagged slightly as he let out a deep sigh. "You can stay," he said, his tone clipped. "But don't think for a second that I've forgiven you. This is Bovie's house now and you answer to him." Doofy nodded quickly, her tears flowing freely once more. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I promise you won't regret this." But as she stepped inside, Basse's eyes followed her, filled with doubt and mistrust. In the days that followed, Doofy worked tirelessly to win her son's affection. She cooked elaborate meals, cleaned the house and offered advice on the family business. Bovie, eager to rebuild a bond with his mother, spent hours talking to her about his plans and dreams. "Mama, we're opening an 8th branch next month," he said one evening, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Doofy smiled, her voice warm. "I'm so proud of you, my son. You're a blessing to this family." But Basse remained distant, watching her every move with suspicion. One evening, as he stepped out of the shower, he froze. Doofy was sitting on his bed, a towel loosely draped around her provocatively. The sight sent a jolt of disbelief through him. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice cold and sharp. Doofy tilted her head, her smile coy, her intentions clear. "I thought we could start over," she purred, her tone low and suggestive. "For old time's sake." Basse's rage erupted like a storm breaking through a dam. Grabbing her arm firmly but without harm, he pulled her up from the bed. "Don't you dare!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. "I only tolerate you because of Bovie. Don't mistake my kindness for weakness. You broke me once and I'll never give you the chance to do it again." His words cut through the air, leaving no room for ambiguity. Humiliated, Doofy pulled away, clutching her towel as she stumbled toward the door. Basse slammed the door behind her and leaned against it, his chest heaving with emotion. Weeks passed, and life in the household began to settle into a tense rhythm. Bovie, overjoyed to have his mother back, spent most evenings with her. Doofy shared fond memories of when Bovie was a baby. For Bovie, her presence brought a sense of completeness he had long yearned for, but for Basse, every smile and kind gesture from Doofy felt like a carefully crafted performance. One evening, just before sunset, Bovie glanced at the time and sighed. "Mama's late for our walk again," he muttered to himself. Resolving to check on her, he headed toward her room. As he approached, he noticed the door slightly ajar and was about to knock when her voice stopped him in his tracks. "Oh, that useless man," Doofy's voice hissed. "Don't mind him, he's so arrogant. He thinks just because he has a little money now he's on top of the world. I even tried to do him a favor by offering him a piece of me, but he rejected me. Like I care. The sight of him disgusts me." Bovie's brow furrowed as he leaned closer. On the other end of the loudspeaker, a male voice replied, "Won't his rejection affect the plan?" "Don't worry," Doofy said with a dismissive laugh. "I have that boy eating out of my hands. Sometimes I wonder if my blood runs through him. Such a fool, just like his father, completely unbelievable. Anyway, it works to my benefit. All I need is for him to donate one of his kidneys to me. My time is running out. After all, what's his use? After carrying him for 9 months, I at least deserve that. Bovie's breath caught in his throat, his heart pounding like a war drum. The words he had just heard pierced through him like a dagger. For a moment, he stood frozen, disbelief and rage coursing through him. Then, unable to contain himself, he burst into the room, his voice trembling with fury. "So all I am to you is a kidney?" he screamed. Doofy spun around startled, her face pale, her phone slipping from her hand. "Jesus!" she exclaimed. "Bovie, it's not what you think," she stammered, but her words faltered as she saw the betrayal etched on his face. "Don't lie to me," he shouted, his voice rising. "I heard everything. Was this your plan all along, to come back and use me like I'm nothing but a spare part?" The commotion drew Basse into the room. His eyes darted between his son and Doofy as he demanded, "What's going on?" Bovie turned to his father, his voice breaking with emotion. "She's only here because she needs a kidney, Dad. That's the real reason she came back. It was never about us." Basse's face darkened, his jaw tightening as he turned to Doofy. "How could you?" he whispered, his voice trembling with barely restrained disgust. "After everything you've done to us, to him, you come back to use our son like this? What kind of mother are you? No. What kind of human being are you?" Doofy fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, you don't understand," she pleaded. "I'm desperate. My time is running out." Basse's expression hardened. "And what about him, Doofy? What about his heart? Must you break it a second time?" "I am so sorry, my son," he said, turning to Bovie, his voice thick with guilt. "Forgive me for giving you such a vile woman as your mother." Bovie took a deep breath, his anger giving way to cold resolve. He stared at Doofy, his voice steady but laced with pain. "I want you gone, Mama. By the time we get back from our walk, I don't want to see you here or ever again. You broke my heart once. I won't let you do it again." Basse placed a comforting hand on his son's shoulder. Together they turned and walked out, leaving Doofy sobbing and begging behind them. For Bovie, this was the final severing of a bond he had hoped to repair. There was no coming back from this betrayal. Doofy was left screaming while kneeling, pleading and hurling curses at the same time. "You good-for-nothings, what's your use?" she screamed, her voice raw with frustration and pain. Okay, I'm sorry, please, I don't know what got over me. So you won't come back? Foolish people, you must feel privileged to be chosen to be my kidney donor. Do you know who I am and how much I am worth?" she said, throwing her shoe at the door. Her voice cracked with desperation as she continued. "Okay, wait, what do you want? I can pay you. Just name your price." But there was no response. Doofy fell silent, her anger turning to sorrow. Her body shook with sobs. But still, no one came to her aid. Bovie and Basse's footsteps faded into the distance. Desperation gripped Doofy's heart like a vice. She called out after them one final time, her voice breaking. "Bovie! Basse! Please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that." But the door to her room remained ajar, echoing her own emptiness. She was alone now, the silence in the room deafening as it matched the hollowness of her heart. The lesson learned is that some people will never deserve a second chance. It's crucial to be careful who you allow to hurt you, because not everyone who comes into your life has your best interests at heart. Sometimes the ones who should protect you become the ones who tear you down. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Protect your heart, because not everyone who says they love you will treat you with the care and respect you deserve. Choose wisely who you let in and never forget that some actions cannot be forgiven. Do you have any similar experiences? Share them in the comments. We love hearing from you.
Hi fam, thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed the story. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss any of your favorite African folktales. Until next time, it's bye from us at Apenthene African Stories.